Thanks for tuning in to more NASCAR talk on Prime Sports NASCAR as we take a look at this weekend's races at Pocono. So we have a doubleheader Saturday and Sunday. We have a lot else to talk about, including a quick look at the playoff standings, the regular season standings, a penalty, actually a couple of penalties, one each for the Cup and Xfinity Series this past weekend, and what kind of implications that will mean for this week's races. Of course, we'll have the odds for this Saturday's races and our picks. Eric Smith not here, so it's just CJ and I once again going solo. And we're going to have all sorts of fun information for everybody, including some fantasy information and tips care of Rotowire. And we want to remind everybody right there, you see the free 10-day subscription on the screen. That link right there, it says Rotowire. Well, actually, it's just a URL. You can take the rotowire.com/PrimeSN. You can copy that, paste it to your browser, and it goes to a page when it opens up. Actually, I have it right here. See, when it opens up, you're going to see it says free 10-day Rotowire subscription. You've got the access to every sport. Don't have to worry about a credit card. And let you know that not only do you get access to NASCAR and football and baseball and everything, but you also have, and that also includes, of course, the tools that you'll be able to use for the week, but also the content that's available as well. That's a pretty neat deal, CJ. It gives you more than enough time to figure out whether or not Rotowire is the website for you. And after 10 days, I can't imagine why they would think otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you have any hesitation about joining Rotowire to help out your fantasy cause, I suggest you take advantage of the 10-day tour, and you will absolutely see all the reasons as to why you should be a subscribing member of Rotowire.com. You've got all the fantasy tools, all the driver updates, lineup optimizer, access to all of my articles, Mark Taylor's articles, all that good stuff to help you dominate your fantasy leagues.
All right. Well, there's some interest. I tell you what, let's wrap up last week first, because Kyle Larson just keeps winning, and he's going through one of those runs that is great for Kyle Larson. It's great for anyone that wants to wager on Kyle Larson, even at incredibly low odds. And it's great, of course, for people like you, TJ, who have Kyle Larson on his fantasy team. But for everybody else, which is the majority of the sport, it's getting kind of boring.
Yeah, I think even I'm ready for somebody else to win. It's great from a fantasy perspective, and it's nice vindication, because if you're in, betting or fantasy sports, you're going to be wrong more often than you're right. And I think earlier in the season, before the season kicked off, I had a really strong feeling that Larson was going to come on strong, be a championship contender, win races, and it's nice to see that actually happening. It'll be interesting to see, how it plays out with Kevin Harvick, Denny Hamlin, and those guys still searching for victories. Plus, you get a really tight battle heating up with the number of, or I should say, lack of playoff positions available to only points guys. So I think we're going to see a big battle for that 16th, 15th, 16th position in the playoff standings as well, which will make the playoffs much more interesting. So looking forward to it. But yeah, Kyle Larson, I avoided him last week. Just a preview on my pick this week. Avoided him again just because the odds each week that he continues to win are going to get smaller and smaller, that he's going to repeat again. And especially when he's coming in this week at 2-1, when you've got that type of odds of it not happening, it's much more likely that he's not going to win just based on a statistical analysis.
You would think, but yeah, it's down to 2-1 now. It doesn't get much lower than 2-1. I'm not sure if have we ever had an even driver?
We've come close. We've not had an even one though. We've had lower than 2-1. I think we've had
150 kind of deal, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's been a few years since we've had anything like that.
I think Harvick or Hamlin last year hit it for maybe 1 week. Yeah,
might have been this weekend.
Probably.
Yeah. Eric decided to go all in. He was like, I give up, and I'm putting it all on Larson. So we'll get into that too. Taking a look at the standings, because you mentioned it. So you see that there's the top standings as far as the points on the left. The playoff outlook is on the right. And right now, Buescher's got a 24-point lead over Kurt Busch. Then you have Ricky Stenhouse, DiBenedetto, and Chastain. And it's just every driver after that's like 10, 15, 20. So where do you draw a line as far as where you think that this driver more than likely is going to have to win a race or else he's not getting in?
I'd probably
Kurt Busch can do it without winning, right?
Yeah, I'd probably put it under Suarez, maybe even include Wallace in that, maybe from Ryan Newman on, well, no, Wallace is significantly further back than Suarez. So
maybe Suarez.
I'd put it under Suarez. I think with stage points, you can make up, you've got to bank on other people having bad days, which isn't always going to be the case when you got 40 cars on track. But I would say at this point, if you're within that 60-point range, you're probably talking about 3 to 4 races, and we've got 3 to 4 races left to go. So if those guys get on a hot streak, I think they could push out somebody like a Reddick or a Chris Buescher.
After this weekend, how many races are there?
Let's see.
Would there be 6
1,
left?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's see if I'm counting right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
After this weekend.
Correct.
Okay, so 7 races. So we got 9 total. Because look, even if you're Suarez and you're 61 points back, that means that you're going to have to finish in the top 10. You
got to be a top 10 every week.
Yeah, and that's just not going to happen. Not for those drivers.
Yeah.
So it's gonna it'll take though not only a driver like Suarez or Chastain to have pretty good success, but also they'll need a Reddick and a Buescher to have some bad races. That Absolutely. Combination, then you don't have to always go into the top 10 as long as you're in the top. Maybe one race you're 13th, but as long as Reddick or Buescher has maybe 3 races out of the last 6 of the season of the regular season where they're 25th and worse, then there's a shot. So
Absolutely.
And Busch is already coming off a bad race where he got, and that wasn't his fault. I don't even know what happened in that situation. Did they ever clarify that?
Was he debris or was he?
I thought it was. That's what they originally thought it was debris, but did they actually figure that out?
You're right. You're right. They thought it was debris, and then I might be getting him confused with somebody else, but they thought it was debris. But I think he was one of the ones that ended up having brake trouble as well, because there were like 3 or 4 guys that had brake problems, and those ended up being failures, whether they caused the tire to go down or the rotor itself just exploded.
Who was the driver that spun out at that time, that Buescher? Because it went, what was it, 77?
Oh, that one. Yeah, that would have been, was that Haley?
Okay. That was who it was? Okay, because he went, and then Buescher went, and that's when it was like, well, was there something left over from the engine from, I guess it was Haley, and then Buescher, because but I never heard them say anything after that, so.
Yeah, they did not circle back on that, unfortunately. But I think it was odd to see the brake issues. There were at least 2 or 3 of them, certainly with the exploding rotor that left stuff out on the track. So I think there were a couple of, certainly people running over debris where that caused issues. But the brake issues were probably more of the bigger surprise to me, to be honest with you. We don't see that often.
And also Reddick has maybe cooling off a little bit. But this is a big weekend for him. And for Buescher to make sure that they don't get into some sort of like a slump that DiBenedetto's been in, which was the reason why I decided to drop DiBenedetto from my fantasy team. We talked about it last week. That okay, I'm going to give one more week with Chastain, and sure enough, Chastain finishes second. I mean, all he had to do was finish like 6th, and I would have taken him anyway, and then I could have gotten the second the next week, hopefully. But he goes ahead with the second. And I wasn't able to get him for that second, but hopefully he'll do it again. And then Eric swooped in after that. And actually, you swooped in after that and decided to go with Stenhouse. And you gave up on
Custer.
Who? No, you didn't give up on Custer. You gave up on Briscoe.
Oh, no. Briscoe. Chase Briscoe.
Yes.
Yep. Sorry.
So, what was your reasoning for giving up on Briscoe for Stenhouse?
I see Stenhouse regaining momentum. I mean, he had momentum early on in the season, went into a bit of a slump. He's starting to get it back, certainly with the finish last week. He had a really great race. It was good for him. So with these high horsepower tracks, rough surfaces, he's been proven quite capable at. And so if the team can get it together, I just see him having more upside potential than a Briscoe coming in and changing his season around, which has been consistently low pretty much all season so far.
And as far as the drivers that are in that haven't won yet, we know Hamlin's in. Harvick's in, right?
Basically, yeah, he's got 100 and
because nobody's going to win. There would have to be 4 new winners to knock him out.
At this point,
yeah, right. 4 new winners.
Yeah, yep.
Okay.
At this point,
which that's not going to happen. Not in 9 races.
Yeah.
It could.
Not
likely.
It's more likely that he would be one of those 4. Yes.
Yeah. Dillon at 108. Is he pretty safe?
Hamlin and Harvick could win this weekend. So that puts him in a position of needing to points his way in. So you'd have to have 2 other people below put him on the bubble, some form or fashion. But yeah, I'd say Dillon's pretty safe at this point.
Yeah, he's okay. But yeah, 3's a lot more reasonable than 4. But yeah, Reddick and Buescher, those are the main ones to keep an eye on. And it's still too for everything else. It's just too early. But Chastain, again, I picked him up for a reason, and so he's now 50 points back. But can he keep this up? That's the thing. He's in a nice little roll right now, but he's just going to have to continue to. If you look at it, in his last 4 races, 3 of them are 7th or better. 2 top 5s and a runner-up last week. He was good in the All-Star festivities. Anything that you've noticed or anything that you've heard of why all of a sudden the light seems to be turned on for Chastain? Because you could have said, well, those were just the road races, but he did it again last week.
Yeah, I've actually been talking about Chastain in my fantasy articles for a while now. He's been quietly creeping up the order since probably even Phoenix or so. I would say he got out of the gate a little bit inconsistently, had some finishes outside the top 20, had a 17th here or there, finished 7th in a Daytona 500, so started the season with a bang. But once he got past, I would say, the Bristol dirt race, he started to be a much more consistent top 15 driver, and he started doing that week in and week out, and he did that for like 4, 5, 6 weeks. And then he started moving into the top 10 and top 5, and you could see in those races that once he started scoring consistent top 15s, I started paying attention to him throughout the race. And more often than when I started paying attention, I started seeing him in the top 10. And for whatever reason, whether it be strategy or handling coming off of his car or restarts or whatever, he would slip back a little bit by the end. So you knew he had the speed. It was just they were starting to figure out, develop the consistency, starting to figure out what moves they needed to make at the end of the races. And then sure enough, starting with Coda, really. I mean, that was his first top 5 of the year. He got a 7th at Sonoma. So even if you want to throw the road course races out, I don't care. He's still scoring consistent top 15s, getting his name in the top 10 during the race. And then certainly at Nashville, coming up with a runner-up finish. He had a great race. And he's been consistently improving, I think, for 3/4 now of the season that we've run so far.
Okay, now, before we move on, a few other things from last week. The penalty. So let's talk about the big one, because there was an Xfinity penalty too. Crew chief Chris Gale was fined $5,000. Same situation. There was lug nuts with the 54
Truex.
car.
Truex had, in the Cup race, Truex had lug nuts, was fined as well.
Oh, okay. They didn't post that.
Yeah.
I'm surprised.
Yeah.
And
so three lug nut
3 of them.
and
yeah.
One of them got the book thrown at him.
Actually, for some reason, maybe this is the old favoritism. For some reason, they're showing the Truex's penalty here. They didn't even show Elliott's. That's weird.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's weird. because in the media site, it just says the 2 penalties, one in the Xfinity Series for the 54 and the 19 in the Cup Series. I didn't see anything in there for Elliott. But James,
You would think that would be the one that you would mention.
I know that's like the biggest story of the week as far as the penalty. But James Small was fined by for Truex. Will he be able to? Will he be present this weekend?
Yeah, he will be. So Small will be there. He just got the fine.
Okay.
Gale will be just got the fine.
Okay.
Really, the number on Elliott that ran him afoul. It's very clear in the rules. If you have less than this, then it's a fine. If you have more than this, then it's an immediate
The number of
disqualification.
lug nuts that are loose.
It's the number. Yeah.
Okay.
And there were five on Elliott, so he eclipsed that red line in the rule book, and therefore got the punishment that came along with it.
And do you think that more often than not, when there are loose lug nuts, that those are they just didn't get them on, or when you're talking about like if it's one, you're probably thinking he just didn't get it on. If it's 5, then you're thinking, well, come on now.
What are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. When easily. It happens all the time. I mean, how many times throughout a race do you think people race with loose lug nuts? I mean, you hear about the wheel vibrations and things like that. Or more often than not, during the race, most cars are driving around with one loose, and I think that's just a matter of people trying to push the envelope. But then when you've got 5, and I don't know the details as to how many were on which tires or which wheels. But when you get to 5, that's, everybody trying to get him out sooner than he should. And that becomes a safety issue. You're going to lose the wheel. You're going to go into the wall, and you're going to bring out the caution. That's dangerous for you, the driver. That's also dangerous for the other guys on the track, because you might catch them up in a crash as well. It's clearly defined. I think that in the rush to get him out, based on the competition that was happening just between him and Larson, they just pushed the envelope too far, and they sent him too quickly.
Okay. Also, one more thing before we move on to this week, and that is the ratings. NBC Sports, this was their first broadcast. They took over for Fox. So their first race, which happened to be at a new track, and I think so who knows? I guess we'll find out this weekend about the ratings and whether or not it's an NBC thing or it was a new track thing, because NBCSN, they had viewership gains better than the last couple of years. By the way, IndyCar also did really well. I'll talk more about that with Eric the next time we talk IndyCar, but they had a really good ratings weekend at Road America. And I want to say this to anybody out there who's wondering about the press conferences on Indy. We weren't able to post the press conferences we did at NASCAR. We did all 3 winners for NASCAR. We did not do the winner Pelot at IndyCar because they didn't provide them, and I believe it was because they couldn't get a really good hookup, because they sent the qualifying press conference and it was really bad. Like, that's why I didn't even post it. It was so bad. And they even moved from one site to another during the broadcast to try to get into a better coverage zone. So my guess is that they just couldn't come up with something that worked really well. So NASCAR better be alerted to that, which I'm sure they are, because they'll be there soon. And NASCAR NBC Sports coverage of the Nashville event, total audience delivery of 2.6 million. So that's up 8%. The last time NBC Sports season coverage opened in June. Viewership was up 22% compared to last year's weekend Cup Series average viewership on NBCSN. And NBCSN ranked as the #1 cable network across all key demos during the race window. Xfinity Series did well too. So, I think we'll find out whether it was a network thing, CJ, or a new racetrack thing.
I'm leaning more toward new racetrack. I think a lot of hype in the city for Nashville, despite the fact that the racing there hasn't been always great. I think having the celebrities there coming for the first time to a new track at a city as big as Nashville, it was a sellout crowd. So I think there was a lot of momentum and popularity behind the race itself. I hope it continues for NBC. I prefer their coverage over Fox. I think that a few times. So I genuinely hope that it does continue for them, and hope it continues for the sport as well, continues to grow it. But I think Pocono will probably be a very good test of whether or not that's sustainable.
Especially Sunday. Because
exactly.
Once you start watching Saturday, and maybe the average fan who might be 5 years, 5 years in or not, or lower, they may be, Pocono, I don't recall, and they'll watch the race, and if it's one of those boring Pocono races, they'll be, I'm not watching this tomorrow. So I don't know if Sunday is going to go off as well as Saturdays. That'll be interesting to find out how that goes.
The true test.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. And Kyle Larson, again, as we mentioned, 2-1 favorite. First, second, including the All-Star win. Do you remember? Have you gone back yet, or do you recall the last time someone was this hot?
I read the name, but I can't think of who it was. It's
got to be either a Kyle or Truex maybe, or who? What do you think?
Or maybe a Hamlin. For some reason, Hamlin is jumping into my mind, but I'm not entirely sure. He's a streaky driver. He's gotten on a number of them, but yeah, it's one of those three. It's been a while since we've had somebody win this many races straight, and I was surprised and not surprised that he came in at 2-1. Early here, certainly he's going to be the favorite just based on the fact of him winning. But if, like I said earlier, if you're into statistics and you know anything about math, the likelihood of it continuing for another week is infinitesimally smaller than it was last week, which was already very slim. So to put 2-1 on that, there must be a lot of money flowing his way.
And look, and I've also said this many times, when you're dealing with favorites, if you have taken, let's say you took Harvick a couple of weeks ago, Larson a couple of weeks ago, and then you took him again last week, well, you just go ahead and take him again, because you've already, and I'm talking about money here, you've already made some good money, a little bit of money at least off of him. Just keep it going until he loses, but don't try and jump on the winning streak.
Yeah.
That's not, especially if you haven't taken him during it. And at 2-1. That's smart.
If you haven't before, now is not the time.
All right. So Denny, and here, it is interesting because, and we'll get into this, but usually we go over and, okay, which driver did we all take the same this week? And we did not take the same driver this week. And the reason for that is because Eric and I both decided to take one driver.
Yep.
So Eric has his driver, as we mentioned. He put his whole 100 on Larson. I'll give you my driver in a bit, but Hamlin's at 7-1. This is one of the drivers that you decided. You basically went with a lot of these next drivers after Larson, like the next 6 or 7, which makes a lot of sense considering if it's just not Larson, I get these next group, and they're all pretty well. The odds are all pretty decent. Hamlin. The last 3 races, first at this racetrack. The only thing is no top 5s the last 5, so he's not exactly coming in on a streak. But he's the active leader all time with 784. Actually, the active leader at Pocono with 785 laps led, and the active leader with 6 wins. So Hamlin is a good choice. The only thing is he's not coming in. This is the weakest streak of his season.
It is, but he still has speed. So if you watch him throughout the races, he's still up front. It's not like he's struggling to get into the top 10 or anything like that. I think it's perhaps them trying different things, maybe to figure out what works, maybe not. Maybe he truly is in a little bit of a slump, or is in a real bona fide slump, I should say. But he's so good at Pocono, and given the speed that he's had for the vast majority of this season, it would not be unexpected for him to come out and win. I don't expect him to dominate like Larson's dominated the past handful of races, but it is a place where he should be in contention. He should be in the top 5, and if things break his direction, I would not be surprised at all to see Denny Hamlin add a 7th win to his total. 32 laps led in the fall or the second race of 2019. And he led 59 laps across the 2 doubleheader races there last weekend, like you said, second and first. So I still think he and Harvick are going to win races before this regular season is over, and certainly either one of them could do it this weekend.
All right, and this is by the way, Hamlin is the driver that you actually put the most money on than any other driver. Okay, Kyle Busch is next, and not only is Kyle good, the odds are good at 8-1 for a driver who has 8 top 10s in his last 9 at Pocono. The only one he didn't have a top 10 is he crashed last year. 5 top 5s, 3 wins, and 377 laps in those 9, which is 41 laps a race. That's how impressive Kyle Busch's run has been lately, the last 9 at Pocono. Therefore, he's also a very good fantasy play.
Absolutely. Led a ton of laps here in the 2 or 3 years leading up to last year's race. And we know races, and we know last year his struggles. He was struggling to find a win at this point in the season, hadn't yet done it, getting more and more frustrated each week. Came out and ran 5th in the first race, and then led 2 laps and ended up crashing in the second race. So I think we're seeing the old Kyle Larson again this year. He's got a victory already, so a little bit more confident, a little bit more comfortable, coming to a place where he's had success at 3 wins, a lot of laps led, 462 in total across his entire career at the track, most of those coming in the last 3 years. So I think last year's 2 races for him at Pocono were an anomaly. I think we'll see the normal Kyle Busch again this weekend, top 5 with laps led, perhaps a win.
Okay, and then the 3 drivers at 9-1. We'll start with my pick. I decided, you know what? I'm going to go. Eric wants to put 100 on Larson. I'm going to put 100 on Byron. So obviously I'll make a lot more money than Eric will be if Byron wins. But I just think Byron is getting so close that this might be a really good time. He has 4 top 10s, and 6 all-time races at Pocono, meaning that he has led. He leads NASCAR all time in average finish at 9.6 at Pocono. But he only has 1 top 5. But still, that's pretty good that you have that average finish for a driver that has 4 top 5s in his last 6. He was 3rd last week. And again, I just think he's overdue that if Larson is the one that eventually takes that step back and he doesn't win a race, I could easily see Byron being the one to take advantage.
Yeah, Byron was definitely going to be in my picks this week in some way or another, unless he came in at 2-1, of course. Then when I saw the odds, it was very easy to get him in there. Just his consistency. I mean, you brought up all the great statistics that he has at Pocono, but just look at what he's done in 2021. I mean, it's been like the Circuit of the Americas. The visit there was his first finish outside of the top 10 since Miami when he won. And that was only an 11th place finish at COTA. Sonoma, 35th, whatever road course, throw it out. But he's right back into the top 5, top 10 again, 4th at Charlotte, 3rd at Nashville. This guy's got speed. He's got consistency. I think we're going to see him advancing in the playoffs, and he was definitely one that I wanted to get into my picks this week, again, because of the consistency and good finishes at Pocono. Just needs to get out there, lead some laps. Another guy I think is going to be a top 5 contender on Saturday at least, certainly Sunday too.
Okay, Truex is also 9-1, just like Harvick. Truex has 2 wins, 18 and 15. And if you take a look at Harvick, though, the defending champ, he leads all active drivers with 40 starts at Pocono. But at least, and by the way, he only has 1 win. And that was last year as defending champ. So he finally broke through with the win, but it was also second. Even though he led just 28 laps in both races, but still first and second. And more importantly, 11 top 10s in his last 13 at Pocono, 9 of those top 5s, and 5 of those are runner-ups. That is tied with Kurt Busch for runner-up finishes. I believe that is, I think that's all time. I don't know if that's the active drivers, but either way, it's very impressive. So if you're thinking of Harvick or Truex, you'd have to lean towards Harvick over Truex, wouldn't you?
Yeah, Truex is starting 15th, I think, as well, and Harvick with his 5th place finish, or top 5, I should say, last week, starting on the second row. So I think that's better. It bodes better for Harvick, and very consistent throughout the 40 starts. A lot of nice top finishes, like you said, but just for whatever reason hadn't gotten the win until last year. And the Sunday race is interesting because they invert the top 20 finishers, and that's how they'll start. They did that last year too.
It didn't matter.
So it didn't matter. Exactly right. He started 20th deeper in the field, and he was second and still led 11 laps. So definitely figured it out last year. I have a feeling the same is going to be true this year, especially coming off the top 5 at Nashville. Truex, my only concern with him is the deeper starting position, but he finished, he started 15th last year in the second race as well, and ended up finishing 10th and led 5 laps as well. So Truex, if you can figure out how to get him in, probably a good fantasy play just based on his starting position, but not a bad choice from the odds perspective either.
Okay, you also put some money on Elliott at 10-1, and he's dealing without his crew chief, right?
Yeah, I believe there's a suspension attached to that.
That's just Saturday or the weekend, do you know?
It would be the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Elliott has 3 top 5s in 10 races. He led 51 laps in his first race at Pocono, but he has only led 16 laps in his last 9 at Pocono. But he's had his moments, including just one Xfinity Series race there. He finished second. But you can see Chase Elliott being the type of driver that he is, coming back strong, and even without his crew chief, kind of sticking it to everybody and winning on Saturday or Sunday.
I would not be surprised, given the penalty, to see him come out and dominate, to be honest with you. And even despite the fact that because of the penalty and being DQ'd from the race completely, his starting position is crap. It's 29th, all the way back there. So if you want a good fantasy play from a finish differential standpoint, Chase Elliott's your guy, and he did it last year too. Started 25th in the second race and finished 4th. So no reason why he's not going to be able to move through the field. He was one of the fastest cars last week. Hendricks got it going on. This is a big track where horsepower matters. Chase Elliott can get the job done regardless of where he starts.
All right. Then Keselowski 12. Then you get the Penske's 12-1 Keselowski, 14-1 Blaney, Logano 16-1. Now you went with Blaney. As a matter of fact, he's like your second top payout, and your top payout of all the top contenders. But Blaney's been 12th or better in 8 of 10 races at Pocono. He's got a win. That was his first ever Cup win. So overall, he would be another, and I'm going to ask you about this too a little bit later on, but he would also be a good fantasy play. Keselowski has been 11th or better in 10 of 11 at Pocono. 7 of those top 5s, 3 of those runner-ups. The only one he wasn't a top 10 during that stretch was a crash, sort of like Kyle. But Keselowski doesn't have a top 10 in his last 6 races this year. And Logano was 36th and 24th at Pocono last year. He has a 1 win in 24 races. He's only led 11 laps in his last 8 at Pocono. So Blaney was your choice of the 3 Penske's.
Yeah, and I think you just made my case for me by by saying all that. Keselowski probably would have been on my radar if he didn't have such a bad race last week at Nashville, finished 23rd. I thought he was starting to come back, had the runner-up finish in the All-Star race. We're starting to see some life out of him, but seems to have taken that step right backward. Logano, 1 win, I think, at Pocono, if I'm not mistaken. But that was a long time ago, all the way back in, I think, 2011 or something. Fairly far away, or is it? No, that was Keselowski. Sorry, Logano's 2012. So I wasn't far off. But yeah, like you said, he has just one top 10 finish at Pocono in the last 5. That was a 7th place finish. He led 11 laps in the first race last year, but ended up finishing 36th, like you said. So certainly some problems. But if you're looking at somebody who can get the job done that's on Penske Racing, Blaney, if he can do it with Wood Brothers, he can do it with Penske full on here this weekend. I know that he didn't have the greatest race or greatest finish, I should say, in the second race last year, but still he led 21 laps. And if you look at the first race where he started on the front row, he finished 12th as well. So, and in fact, that 12th place finish was his 5th straight finish of 12th or better at Pocono. So he's got the consistency. He knows what he needs at the track. Certainly of the Penske guys this week, normally I would go with Logano. Blaney is going to be my guy this week.
And I'm not sure what the strategy was last year. Could have been that he just got completely screwed by the strategy. Mm-hmm. And that's
Absolutely.
the thing to keep an eye on, especially with as good as Larson's been. I got to imagine you're going to see several of the top teams that are going to go out of strategy, and they are going to roll the dice early, and they're going to try whatever they can to beat Larson and split up the playing field and see how it goes, because that's the thing about Pocono is you don't know who's going to try what, extending gas mileage, late pit calls for tires and fuel, who knows, but there's going to be a lot of different. Sometimes you watch a race at Pocono, and if you don't watch it from the beginning and you just try to tune in halfway through and you just turn it on and you see who's first or whatever, that could mean nothing, absolutely nothing, if you haven't watched it from the beginning.
Absolutely. It's a 2.5 mile track. So if you pit, unless you've stayed out so long that the leader's right on your tail and you're getting threatened to be lapped already, you're going to get in and get out without losing a lap. And by the way, when you come out, you're not going to have traffic around you either. And it's going to take you a long time to catch up to traffic. So you're going to be able to run qualifying laps. So it very much, this track with its length, its size, and the time it takes to get around really opens the door to a lot of creative strategies. And we've seen the race here won by fuel strategy. People running out of gas on the last lap, trying to stretch it all the way. It's going to depend on where cautions fall and the stages kind of break it up a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised to see people giving up stage points to be able to set themselves up for winning the race later on.
And a couple more things for strategy or track trends. 6 of the last 8 winners at Pocono started in the top 10, including 11 of the last 14. Blaney, we said it last week, and we've been saying it for weeks now. We were talking about you can't win a championship without your team. And we pretty much ripped Blaney's team last week.
Yes.
And what happens to start the race on Sunday? He has to go to the back before the race even starts. It's got to be driving him crazy.
Yep, absolutely. Not sadly not surprising given the way that his season has gone and the missed calls that they've had. Unfortunately, they've got to get their act together. Pocono is a place where they have to have it together, but I think Pocono is a place where they know how to get it together. So I think the odds are pretty good for them this week.
Bowman, the last of the contenders, 20-1. He has one top 5 in his last 5, couple top 10s in his last 5, but he's never led a lap there in 10 races. So no surprise that nobody took him this week.
Yep. Thought about him, but then seriously, when you look at his Pocono record, he does have a 3rd place finish. That was really the anomaly. It was in the second race of 2018, and he finished in the top 10 the second race there last year. But like you said, really, aside from those kind of few pops, he's been there 10 times, and his average finish is worse than 20th. So not really high on Bowman this week. I would go with the other Hendrick guys.
Now with the long shots, and if there were if there were 2 long shots I would have taken this week, I would have taken your long shot, Kurt Busch, at 50-1. Kurt Busch, even though he doesn't have a top 5, is in his last 7 at Pocono. He has 14 in his career, 3 wins in his career. He's tied with Harvick with those 5 runner-ups. And when he won in 2007, he led 175 of the 200 laps. That is the all-time record for leading laps and winning a race at Pocono. And in his last 2 races, he's 6th and 8th. So he's put together his best back-to-back races of the season, coming to a track that he's had one of his most successes historically. So Kurt Busch has got to be on your long shot list this week. I was surprised you also did not do Almirola, because I would have done, again, if I was gonna not go all in on Byron, Almirola would have been one of my long shots. 3rd and 5th last year, led 61 laps from the pole, 12th or better in 5 of his last 6 at Pocono, including 2 top 5s last year. And he has and this is not good, but he has the most active starts at Pocono without a win. And considering, and that's 17, by the way, but considering that that's the case, it's almost the exact opposite of Larson in a good way, that maybe Almirola is the one that's now overdue for a win. At 50-1, you got to throw a couple of bucks on him.
I did look very hard at Almirola, and there are a couple reasons why I stayed away. Mainly, I don't know if last week was unique or not. We don't know that yet. It was one, but if you look at the rest of his season, he qualified well.
And he's a big concrete guy, which we were not surprised that he actually qualified well.
Exactly right. So those 2 things, I don't know if you go back to a normal track again, if he's right back into the slump that he had before. He does start 11th, so that's better on average than he started for the vast majority of this year. So it should be an up day for him, but is it enough for him to actually come through and find a long shot win? I'm not convinced yet. If he's got another good week and he comes through and he races well at Pocono, then that's going to set him up well for the following races, because he's going to have the better starting position and he's going to start getting that momentum and confidence behind him. So I was thinking more of probably Sunday, to be honest with you.
See how he does on Saturday.
Yeah, if I see life out of him Saturday, he's probably going to be on my list for Sunday, depending on what he does. But with Kurt Busch, from a long shot perspective, I don't know how you don't choose him.
Absolutely.
I would put him above Almirola for sure. But Almirola, for in all seriousness, I very much looked at him and almost had some money on him, but ended up going with Busch instead.
Okay, and then Bell's also at 50-1. He finally got another top 10 last week, so we'll see if he was 4th in the race last year. So maybe that combination will get his confidence going again. Reddick is also 50-1, but he was awful here last year, and he's actually kind of slowing down his momentum just a bit. Anything with Reddick or Bell?
I actually looked at Reddick as well, but then the recent trends, like you said, over the past couple of races, he started to slow down. That hasn't been quite the same strong finisher with the upside potential as I've seen, so stayed away from him. Christopher Bell, I think, would be a pretty decent play. Not a whole lot of history here, but like you said, the top 5, that's really good for him. Plus, we know he's had the pace this year.
Okay, and then the really deep long shots. Chastain has just been too hot to not throw a buck on him. I don't care what his previous record is anywhere at this point, because he didn't have any previous records at these other places, and he did well too. So I wouldn't worry about that. And look, he was runner-up in his last Xfinity race at Pocono. That was last year, and he led 31 laps. So throw a buck on Chastain. Why not? Busch,
and his teammate's Kurt Busch.
There you go. Nice combination. Yeah, you're gonna do Kurt Busch, do Chastain. Do a teammate thing there. Buescher's 100-1. So is DiBenedetto, Dillon, and Jones. Buescher, of course, he won the rain-shortened race, which is first Cup race victory in 2016. 10th last year in this race. Jones, there's a couple of races a year, even with Petty, that you have to look at him. And this has to be that week. 5 top 5s in 8 races at Pocono. A runner-up. And in the Xfinity Series, he finished 2nd from the pole in his only Xfinity Series race in 2016. This has got to be either his first or second best track. So at 100-1, I mean, if you're like I said, if you're gonna even throw a buck or two on Jones a few times a year, this would be the week to do it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think It's going to be a stretch for Petty to win a race, no doubt, and obviously they've had their struggles throughout the year. But Jones knows this track, so if worse comes to worse, if anything, this is going to be a barometer for what he is capable of lifting that team to. So we'll truly see probably one of the highest points of what they're going to be able to achieve for the rest of the season this weekend at this track.
And 150-1, Stenhouse Jr. coming off the 6th place finish last week, looking for his first top 10 in Pocono in his 17th try. Suarez, though, has 3 top 10s and 1 top 5 at 8 races at Pocono. He was also 9th and 5th in 2 Xfinity Series races at Pocono. So Suarez likes Pocono. He's actually on the pole at Pocono back in 2018 and finished second, leading
Led 20.
29 laps. So that's not a bad idea. I throw a buck on him.
Yeah, he was one I looked at as well. The reason I didn't was the last 3 Pocono races, 24th, 28th, and 26th. Obviously, 2 of those were with Gaunt brothers. He should be able to perform better than that with his new team this year, Trackhouse. The 24th place was with Stuart Haas. But yeah, second place from pole, 2019, he was 8th. He's got one other top 10 back in 2017 at this track. So Suarez was definitely somebody who was on my list. I think out of all the long shots that we've talked about, the one I'm kind of most surprised about, to be honest with you, is Buescher at 100-1, because Roush Fenway is on a good streak. He's got the top 10 there. He's got the win there. Granted, it was rain shortened. Yeah, they had a bad week last week with the contact with the wall, but they've shown competitive fight and speed this year. So this might be a place where they would be, I would think, a little bit better than 100-1, maybe 75-1, but that's a little bit of a stretch for him.
Okay, so I put together, and we'll start doing this too every week. I put together like a fantasy list of who I thought might be top fantasy drivers, sort of like in a group between Kyle Busch, Byron, Harvick, Keselowski, and Blaney. And this also, again, this depends on where they're going to be lined up and all that stuff. And also Elliott. Out of those 6 drivers, tell me which ones you like.
Elliott.
He would be first.
Elliott. I would choose Elliott first, because I don't think there is any way, unless something dramatic happens, that he doesn't finish in the top 10, and he's starting 29th. So there's 19 points guaranteed for you right there, which is more than average. Secondly, probably, I don't know, maybe Byron or Busch, to be honest with you, because I think either one of them has the potential. Certainly, both of them should lead laps. Either one of them could be. I would expect both to be in the top 5, and then either one of them could win the race. Okay. I think Hart a little bit further behind than those two, but that's probably how I would rank them. I'd probably put Elliott first, certainly, and then Byron and Busch together, and then Harvick probably a close 4th.
And then the last one is for some of the long shots: Almirola, Kurt Busch. We'll also talk about Jones, and I'll throw in Buescher. So out of those, who would you put at the top? Almirola, Kurt Busch, and Jones really would be interesting, but you got to believe Almirola and Kurt Busch, that's the battle?
Yeah, it would be the battle between the top 2 would be Almirola and Kurt Busch for sure. Buescher, just I think he goes to the bottom of the list just because of he's not had the consistency of the other guys at this track.
Who's farther back, starting position wise? Who's benefiting fantasy wise because they've got the worst starting position?
Jones is 22nd. Kurt is 8th. Almirola is 11th, and then
Buescher had a bad week last week, so
Buescher's 25th. Yeah, so Buescher probably, he's probably more like a top 12 kind of guy. So there's some 13 points for you right there. Jones probably about the same, so maybe 10 points right there. Busch probably a little bit. Probably less of an upside on finish differential, but I do think he's got a legitimate shot to win the race and lead laps.
So the formula for fantasy formula for, and again, every week is different for what we do. Our year fantasy teams and formulas are completely different. but for what you guys do and what normal fantasy NASCAR people do, besides looking at where you're going to be starting and who you're going to be passing and a win, what else do you look at?
As good a finish as you can get and as many laps led as possible. So if you're going to go out and dominate a race, you can pick up a ton of points from leading laps, or you can go with somebody that you think is going to move all the way through the field and get your finish differential points. Then basically you're probably looking at fastest laps, which kind of hit and miss. Sometimes some formats have those, some don't. But really after those two, you're looking at finishing positions. So who do you think is going to finish in the top 5, top 10? And how many of them can you get in there?
And I'm just going to throw this hypothetically, and you can just guess. But if Elliott, let's say Elliott finishes second and doesn't lead a lap, and Larson leads 50 laps and wins the race, who has more fantasy points?
Larson.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of laps.
What if they were both? What if they both had the same amount of? Let's say if Larson had 100 laps and Elliott had 50, and they finished first and second.
They might be pretty equal on points at that.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think I would always go for somebody who's going to dominate the race and win it and spend a lot of time out front than somebody who's going to come from the rear. Though the person that comes from the rear has the potential to score more points, I just think it's more likely to bag the points if you're going to spend the day out front, which Larson typically does.
All right. So, CJ, tell me a little bit, as usual, about your barometer report that comes out on Friday.
The fantasy previews will come out over the next, probably Friday, actually. Yeah, we've got the truck race on Saturday, the first cup race on Saturday. So we'll have fantasy previews out for both of those. We'll probably combine the cup race, since they're so close together, being back-to-back Saturday and Sunday. We'll probably combine both races into one fantasy preview. And then the Xfinity race will be Sunday before the second cup race. And then on Monday, I'll have a recap, tell you who was hot, who was not, on the NASCAR barometer. That'll come out sometime on Monday on rotowire.com.
All right. And again, as I'm posting on the screen, that's what you're going to see if you use the www.rotowire.com/PrimeSN. Copy that, go to that URL, go to that page. This will pop up. Free 10-day Rotowire subscription, access to every sport, plus the DFS tools. Again, you're not going to be giving them a credit card. You don't have to worry about that. You get the content, and it's not just NASCAR. So you have a full range of sports to check out at Rotowire for the entire 10 days. And then chances are you're going to love it so much that you're going to want to subscribe. So
absolutely.
CJ, appreciate it as always. Next week, what do we got?
Next week, we go to Road America. So hopefully, right spot to have the press conferences at.
They better fix that. Or else we might not be showing their press conferences. But we have been doing that. We mentioned that. So check out the channel after. Well, that depends on when we get it. But hopefully we're able to get them the night of every race if they can get it done in time and post it and all that. But we'll have the Xfinity winner each week, the truck winner, and the cup winner. The press conference of all three winners of all three races if they race, or a second race, of course. So we'll do that twice in the Cup Series. Should be a busy weekend at Pocono, CJ, and we look forward to wrapping that up, talking about the first ever Road America race course race for the Cup Series. That should be a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll talk to Eric as well next week. I know we're going to do the silly season show, by the way, with Eric, so that's kind of why you took the week off. A lot of work on getting that ready. So we're going to have 2 silly season shows. One to explain the charter system, which I had to learn myself, which I'm glad that's over. And I'm still not sure. So I'm going to have to get pumped for more information when I talk to Eric on the show. And then the second part will be the projection of where the drivers are going to go and what teams and so forth for 2022. So that's coming up with Eric. We'll probably have both shows recorded no later than by time we do our show here next week. So looking forward to that. CJ, appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.